Hello, David Moore, Equity Advantage, 1031exchange.com, and today we're going to talk briefly about the 1031 identification rules. These rules have been in place since, actually fall of 1991. And previous to that point in time when we got the final guidelines on these three different options, we actually had a situation where you could ID a county if you wanted. And I think that sort of contributed to the old statement, buyers are liars. But in today's world, if you're a broker and you're concerned about what's been ID'd in a property for a 1031 exchanger, you think about who you're representing in the transaction. If you're working as a buyer's broker for somebody in the 1031, you obviously don't want anybody else to know where you are in the 45th and 180th day timelines or what's been identified. Now, if you're the listing broker and you've got a 1031 buyer coming in, you're probably going to do your best to find out what's been ID'd and where they are in the 45 and 180 days. You want to make sure that your property's the one that's to be acquired, not that fallback, that second or third choice. But I want to stress we've got three different identification rule options. So we've got three different ways to do this. Each one works independently of the others. The first one is the three property rule. And this is a very important topic because a lot of times people will say, well, gee, I've been told I can only identify three properties. And that's totally incorrect. You can ID any number of properties. But the three property rule, the first option, the one that's used most often, just says you can ID up to three properties of any value. So I want to stress no cap in value on what you're identifying. You're just limited to those three properties. Second rule is the 200% rule. The 200% rule says you can ID more than three properties, but the total value of the properties ID'd cannot exceed 200% of the relinquished property's value. So if you sold $1 million property, you can go out and ID $2 million worth of property. It could be any number of properties that you're identifying. It's just the aggregate value of all those properties ID'd cannot exceed that $2 million number in that example. Now, there's a third option out there, too, and it works if somebody wants to ID more than three properties and the value exceeds 200% of the relinquished property's value. The issue with it is, in its title, it's the 95% rule. And I know some great brokers out there. I know some very active investors we've been working with for decades, but nobody wants to wrestle with this rule. So what it says, you can ID more than three properties. The value can exceed to 200%, but you've literally got to close 95% of the aggregate value of all properties ID'd. You're closing everything you've identified in that situation. So that's something that's not used very often. We probably see it used more often when people are getting deals closed inside that 45-day ID period, because if you get outside the 45 days, now you've got a real problem there. If you had one sale fail, for example, that quite possibly could kick you out of that 95%, probably will. So once again, you've got the three property rule, the 200% rule, the 95% rule. Each one works independently of the others. Now, something else I'd like to mention is if I go back when my brother and I started this company in 1991, we got a hold of an audit manual. The audit manual asked, well, was the property or were the properties identified on that 45th day? Were they on the market at that point in time? Were they listed? And that has absolutely nothing to do with whether a property can be identified. A property does not have to be listed with a broker to have it available. So when we're looking at what satisfies the identification, what the government's going to want to see is an unambiguous description. That could be a common address, including city, state, and zip. If you're going to buy a piece of a property, you need to identify the portion you intend to pick up. Now, if you're identifying the entire asset and you pick up more than half of it, you shouldn't have any issue there. But if you ID the entire asset and you pick up 20% of it, 30% of it, you're going to have a problem potentially if you get audited. So the idea is be as accurate as you can with the identification. It just says an unambiguous description, and you need to receive substantially the same thing. Lots of gray in this code, but anytime you're looking at percentages of ownership, you need to ID that piece you intend to buy. You can change your mind anytime until midnight the 45th day. The other question that comes up a lot is, are there any extensions offered? And the only time you're going to see any extension is if there's a presidentially declared national disaster. So it's not an elective extension. You can change your mind over and over and over again up until midnight that 45th day. And I guess one other thing I want to mention is when you're looking at at value numbers, what is a property worth? And as I just stated, a property does not have to be listed to be identified. So if it's not listed, if it's not on the open market, what is it worth? What number should you put down on that identification form? And I'm going to tell you, put the number on it that you intend to buy the property for. You're really looking at a situation where there's always highest best use. And if you watch our videos, you've probably heard me joke before that my youngest brother's an MAI appraiser. That's the top of the heap in the appraisal world. He doesn't do houses and things, just a lot of commercial and land. But if I ask him, well, how do you know you did the right job? He's going, well, it's easy. Nobody's too happy or too mad. So, that's one of those things. It's going to be highest best use, and there's a little bit of room there in those valuations. So you've got the 3 property rule, 200% rule, 95% rule. Each one's independent. You're looking at the values on that 200% and the 95% rules. You need a value that you're going to put along with that property identification. And I'm telling you, you ought to put in there what you intend to buy it for, and that should suffice. Don't be way off on those numbers, because you could have problems there. You want to put a best effort into those values if they're not listed at the time you identify those properties. Once again, David Moore, Equity Advantage. And if you've got further questions on this topic or any other, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to talk to you. And we're always looking for ideas for content. Hit that like button, subscribe. It helps us out. And we're going to continue to get information out for you on any topics that you guys want to see. Thanks, David Moore, Equity Advantage, 1031exchange.com. Bye-bye. All my friends,